Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, this is John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your best, most true, authentic business voice. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, make billions of dollars, and yeah, we guarantee that, right? We don't. But we're really working on that. Find the person of your dreams. Hasn't happened yet, but today's guest may be the one to help us do exactly that. And another a colleague of mine from the Podmatch Podcast Network. I have to say that slowly so I don't slur all the words together. Nicholas Kühne, welcome very much to the show. Very much welcome to the show.
Well, what a treat to be with you tonight, John.
Absolutely. Pleasure is all mine. Our man, Nicholas, here is a branding expert who also hosts his own podcast that I will get the chance to be able to join. You got to check out From Startup to Wunderbrand. And Nicholas is an expert digital marketing, branding, entrepreneurship, and not just a traveler, but a world liver in terms of countries, Europe, Africa, bunch of points in the midst of all of that. And to me, as we all are looking to broaden our horizons in one way or another at this point, I felt like this is a perfect episode to lean into all of that. Nicholas, let me ask you right off the bat, why did the travel bug take so much for you? Was it circumstantial, or was it more just wanting to see things differently?
Well, it was one of the cases where I'm not much of a traveler. I actually can't stand traveling. My wife forces me along to go to all sorts of places, but circumstance sent me to my first opportunity, which was to move to the UK to play cricket and study my A-levels. So that was in 98, 99. I was just thinking back to that. And that was my first time really out the country. And that opened my mind. And this was a stage when South Africa was just opening up. It was a couple of years after 1994 when apartheid finished, communism was finished, all of these things. And I wanted to get back as soon as possible, to be honest. So I was very happy to get back to South Africa. But fast forward a couple of years, did my degree, and the trajectory for me as a white South African had changed quite a bit, because previously we had obviously quite a set path. There was only less than half the population was allowed to do certain jobs. So those jobs were reserved for us. And all of a sudden, those jobs no longer available and specifically excluded, specifically for white males like myself. So my trajectory that I had sort of been planning for my entire life, gone. And as opposed to weeping and wailing and gnashing teeth, etc., there's an opportunity to move into Africa. So we talk about Africa. South Africans don't see the rest of Africa as Africa. So we're going up into Africa if we do anything above the South African border. And at this stage, Africa was also warming up. If you remember, in the early 2000s, every CNN program, every Time magazine was about its Africa century. So there was a lot of hype and there was a lot of excitement about Africa. So I moved up to Nigeria as a young man and set up a research company there with JWT. And that started off my career trajectory. So it was really tough. It was an awful place to go to, but wonderful at the same time. Opened my eyes to Africa and different people and different cultures. And that, because I was one of the few folks who'd actually worked in Nigeria in my particular field, it was then open season. So I had opportunities at Interbrand, which is a wonderful brand agency. I went and worked at Nando's, which is a fantastic restaurant chain. And through Nando's, I went and opened up restaurants in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. There's this huge sort of expansion into these emerging markets. So, majority of my experience has been in taking international brands into emerging markets. And obviously, the cultural shocks, the different ways of working, the language barriers, the different food, the different weather, the different working environments, all of these things. Uh, I got to see a really good cross section of that throughout Africa and Asia, and yeah, it was a fascinating time, but and it's something. It's more of a young man's game, I think, John.
I may be
I'm
able to relate to that. I may, but you gave me, and I'm grateful, a lot to unpack. And I want to take one step backwards prior because I want to touch on one thing before you've begun your travel, like I said, life, so to speak, not travel, your business life. Um, I want to when I think about the timeline, you reminded me, right? So like 1994. And when I think about that, and maybe that's just because as I've gotten older, that doesn't feel that long ago. Folks, for anyone in their 20s, I apologize to you for just saying something like that to make me sound so old, but that doesn't feel that long ago in terms of timelines. What was in your mind? You talked about the fact that the jobs that you thought were like held for you, that sense of entitlement, gone. What was the difference like in terms of whether it was navigating your day-to-day life or whatever, when the changeover occurred, when apartheid was, dismantled, for lack of a better word. And what was that like for you?
well, apartheid didn't come crumbling down like the Berlin Wall
Okay.
and communism. This
Okay.
had been quite a long time in in action. So in
Mhm.
1990 is really when, and in the late 80s, that's when things really started to sort of calm down.
Mhm.
And because the communists were losing power and couldn't send money to Africa anymore, the chances of us being murdered and
Mhm.
sent to the gulags, like our poor friends in Rhodesia, Mozambique,
Right.
and where's the other one? Angola
Mhm.
and Zimbabwe, etc. Those kind of that wasn't on the cards anymore. So both sides had an opportunity to play nicely together, basically. So
Mhm.
there was this great sort of sense of, oh, okay, things can actually improve. So when I was growing up, and my dad is an Anglican priest, and the Anglican Church typically was involved in what they call the struggle and was always very progressive. So always they were always fighting against the nationalist government
Mhm.
and being a fly in the ointment. So not to say we were struggle warriors or anything like that, but we'd always grown up with black kids. All the schools I went to were mixed. We had
Okay.
it was an environment where apartheid wasn't really a real, the apartheid that you sort of hear about
Mhm.
wasn't as apparent in sort of the circles that we were in.
Mhm.
But and obviously South Africa had uh, Nelson Mandela, which helped a
Yeah.
lot. So that was
Mhm.
very good for the healing process. The fall of communism, obviously, and there was a sort of a sense of euphoria. There was about a 10-year period after 94, once the
Mhm.
elections happened, and there wasn't mass violence. There was the Truth and Conciliation events, etc. So things were quite positive for a while. And as with all sort of liberation parties, and that the ANC, which became the it became a single party state in South Africa, things started to slowly slide downwards. And but as a and this is going back into sort of my personal side and
Yes.
going a little bit further back into history, my ancestors came to Africa and to the colonies to make it mini Europe, to be honest. So that
Mhm.
was what the
Mhm.
the aim was, and that is a an experiment that has not failed, but it has run its course. So the idea of trying to have a little Europe in the bottom of Africa, the same as a majority of other colonies, that has come to an end, and that is a logical progression. And South Africa, as it is now, is being driven in a specific direction.
Mhm. Yeah.
And good luck to the government and to the folks that are there. My aim is not. My aim is to sort of be slightly more of a citizen of the world, not to be sort of stuck in one particular place.
Mhm.
And with uncertainty globally, I think the move to Norway, where we are now,
Mhm.
has been quite a good one.
Mhm.
It's especially for kids. I think if I was a young person, Norway wouldn't necessarily be the first place I'd go to, but with a young family, this place is marvelous. So that's a bit of a circuitous way of going about it. South Africa is a fabulous place. It's got everything that opens and shuts,
Mhm.
roads, weather. It really is rather beautiful. But I've traveled the world. I've seen a lot of things, and yeah, happy to have a new country to explore. Basically, we'll go back to our roots, our Scandinavian roots.
See, like going home, in a
Yeah.
sense, that sense of going home. But I also love the fact that I would imagine that you take pieces with you. I think about you as a brand expert, brand leader. And so you've got to take, not you gotta, you often do take perspectives along for the ride. So you specifically stated Nigeria and that it not being the most ideal place to be in regards to certain conditions. What would you say would be in terms of conditions or situations of all of the places that you've traveled that you thought, oh, this is going to be great, that I've immersed myself in, that's the word I want, that I've immersed myself in. What would be a couple of places that you were like, oh, this ought to be great?
Honestly, I have every place that I've gone to, I've gone, wow, this is great. So
Okay.
even though Nigeria I mean, the first time I went into Nigeria,
Mhm.
that was in 2004 or five,
Okay.
and they'd just come out of Sani Abacha's regime, and they'd come through, some terrible issues in that country, and the roads were in a disaster. There were burnt out trucks and cars everywhere. There were bodies every now and then that people wouldn't touch, and they'd just be lying on the road. So it was quite horrific, and animals and eating garbage and things
And
on
you're
the.
there while this is
Yeah,
going.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was when I first got there, but you could see the opportunity, and the thing is with all of these countries, it's the people that make it so awesome, and
Right.
the food, and I love food. So
Great.
the food in Nigeria, it
Mm.
does take some getting used to, but you get to like your favorite thing. You like to get
Mm.
plantain, which are these giant bananas, roasted
Oh.
plantains, and eating goat and their local street food, and then the people were just like sponges. They were so open to learning, so open to
Mhm.
getting experience from folks out of the country that it made my stay really nice. And
Mhm.
there are some beautiful parts in Lagos and in that part of
Mhm.
the world. Um, they're places that I wouldn't want to necessarily go back to. So I had a couple of bad experiences in India, and
Mm.
partly because I've seen poverty and I've seen African poverty, and
Right.
I've seen that side. But Indian poverty is on another level, and it is very disheartening
Mhm.
and very depressing. So, and especially since at the stage when this is before I had kids, but
Mhm.
seeing these little children on the side of the road begging and with
Mm.
absolutely zero chance of making anything of themselves in the world, that depressed me. And one thing I like to do is sort of have blinkers. If I don't think about it or can't see it, it doesn't happen. And unfortunately, if you are too empathetic, being in places like this where you see things like this every day, you just have this sinking feeling that there's nothing that you can do, and it's very depressing. So my way of dealing with that is just to ignore it, and because no matter what you do, you can't do anything. Even you can make little incremental differences, but it would make me too depressed knowing I can't solve everything. So that was, yeah,
How do you build up the strength to wear the blinders and have it work?
that's practice, I guess,
Okay.
because you've almost got to make a decision. You've got to be quite heartless. So similar to brand strategy, you've got to
Mhm.
focus on what you can do and what you can't do. What it did make me think about is that okay, I can't make any impact here, but back home and in the environment that I'm in, I will make sure that I make more impact there or I do better things there. So that's how I balance it out. It's like this is not my country. I don't live
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
Giving a child $1 or two here is not going to make their life better. But where can I make a difference that is slightly more palpable? It made me angry with people that they
Mhm.
can let people live like this and not look after their sort of the most vulnerable in society. So that
Mhm.
depressed me quite a lot when you see folks driving around with expensive cars and
Oh.
wasting their money on missiles and
Oh.
expensive tchotchkes
Mhm.
to blow things up with. That annoys
Mhm.
that makes me very upset. So in terms of blinkers, it's not being indifferent to human suffering, but it's knowing where you can make a difference and not trying to put the whole world's burdens on your shoulders because that can make you very depressed. And I suppose that's why my dad is stronger than me as a priest. Is that
Mhm.
from a spiritual perspective, they do put the world. They have to be open to more emotional issues like this than regular folks, perhaps.
Well, that's why I asked the question, because to me, that happens on such a regular basis now. And whether your perspective is limited or limiting, if you haven't visited other places, or like for me, as I said, I've traveled, but I can't say except for one country, I can't say I've actually immersed myself. And I think about the fact that I find it fascinating that I'll speak for me, not for other people. That it's like you think you've seen a lot, whether it's age or experience or whatever the case may be, and then I speak to somebody like you that has lived in so many different countries and had to immerse yourself, and that's why I wanted to focus on that simply for a moment. You brought up your dad in regards to where they have to, because otherwise it gets overwhelming. I guess what I would ask is like, so I'll step back one thing before I continue, which is who were you with professionally when you were in India?
So I was with a company called Nando's, and
Yeah,
Nando's is
right.
one of a
Hmm.
very fast growing restaurant chain,
Hmm.
and they've got the best chicken basically in the world. So if you
Hmm.
want delicious peri peri flame grill or flame grilled peri peri chicken, that's the company to go to. So with them and with Coca Cola, so we partnered.
Hmm.
We were Coca Cola was a global partner, so we worked very closely with Coca Cola in these territories. So, for example, in Pakistan, we'd do promotions and campaigns there and bring cricket stars from around the world to
Hmm.
come and visit there.
Hmm.
Just the scale of things in India was on another level as well. It's very similar to America, I guess, in terms of in South Africa and Europe, you have if a company's got 10 outlets or 50, it's like, holy wow, this is a enormous company. We had one potential in India where they said, "Oh yeah, we've got 1,000 cinemas around the country. We have 1,000 of these stores." These are incomprehensible numbers to most people coming out of Europe or coming out of Africa,
I
but to Americans and Chinese, and that it's like, oh well, uh,
We have
just double
5,000.
that
Yeah,
number. Yeah. So, so coming from Africa,
right.
and places where having one restaurant is
Is
quite cool.
something.
Those kind of numbers are just outrageous for us.
Hmm.
So that was in India, and then I was head of marketing for MTV in Africa, so
Hmm.
with Viacom. So I launched Comedy Central into Africa and worked on MTV Base throughout Africa. That was quite fun, and and then with my own business, I've worked all around the world as well. So Africa, Asia,
Mhm.
and I might not have mentioned, but I lived in Malaysia for 4 years as well, where I set up a data science company, and that was sort of during the COVID period as well. And that was another wonderful country. And if you talk about getting immersed into a country, what I've always tried to do is learn the language, or at least some of it,
Mhm.
in order to um, be able to go and order things at a coffee shop or at the side of the road, or
Well, you're a
make people
foodie.
that,
You're a
yeah.
foodie. So with that being just if you just started there, they rather than going to the Four Seasons Malaysia, you know what I mean, and having whatever their definition is, that you're actually able to speak to people and speak to them in a way that they want to be spoken to, right?
It just shows a little bit of empathy in terms of
Mhm.
you've taken made the effort, and half the time you're butchering the language anyway, but at least it shows that you've got a bit of interest, and people do appreciate that most of the time.
I worked for a Spanish language television company for about 12 and a half years in the States. And they were Mexico based, but in the States. And I always remember, often, not always, often remember that I would butcher some of the language, and how I knew it would be whoever I was speaking to. They would answer me in English. And so I just always felt that was like their version of a pat on the head. Oh, that's nice. But the answer from that perspective was our whole mission. And I was on the sales side of the television landscape more than the programming side. And for us, it was a matter of making people feel welcomed, invited, and included. And if you at least met them a portion of the way, didn't even have to be halfway. If you met them a portion of the way, they would carry the burden to help you get across whatever it was you're trying to get across, whether it was in language and or intention. Now I wanted to ask you, like, I want to go back to the India part one more time, and I've heard that it's just an overpowering experience from those that have been there. Some of it is breathtaking in regards to what you're seeing, and some of it is just really rough. So you're with Nando's, right? If I remember correctly, you're working with Nando's. Does your vision change as you're promoting the best chicken? You know what I mean? You want to go for the best chicken, and that inherently, I don't know why, puts a smile on my face. But when you're seeing such blight, does your again does your vision change, or does the branding message get altered, or what have you, or is it just our job is to promote Nando's and what have you, align with Coca Cola? How does that change, or does it?
So let's exclude the brands, because I'm not going to obviously be
Oh, you don't have
talking
to give
on
me
on
specifics to the
on on
brands.
on
I'm
their
speaking
behalf,
more to
but
you.
absolutely zero impact,
Okay, got
because
it.
at
That's all.
and me personally,
Mhm.
as well.
Okay.
These, as it says in the Bible, the poor will always be with us. So I think we've got to keep that
Mhm.
in mind.
Mhm.
But when it comes to selling and working, you've just got to carry on.
Yeah.
And again, there are strata in society. There are some
Mhm.
people who are going to buy your product and some who aren't.
Mhm.
And when one looks at your CSR, your corporate social responsibility, or your
Mhm. Mhm.
sustainability actions, that's where you can start giving back. But again, you've got to make money first and start
I got you.
and start from somewhere. So in terms of how you communicate, we are not a charitable organization. That's not how we went out into the
Yeah.
market. And I would, it's important that the company does have some kind of social impact in
Mhm.
terms of, bringing up people in from certain areas to work in the stores and
Mhm.
using certain
Mhm.
suppliers. But you can't get that to impact, it can't have a detrimental impact on your business financially when you're starting out. So it's very nice if that's part of your strategy to start out to be a company that is focused on social change. But the majority of people in businesses, it's about making sure you can pay your staff, making
Yep.
sure your suppliers
Yep.
get paid, making sure that the rent gets paid,
Mhm.
and that's your focus. So, just, yeah, from my experience, absolutely not. the best way to take people up from their bootstraps is through business and paying people salaries, and that
Mhm.
filters down. It's the only way.
I love it. And to me, I get it. That's the thing. I see that more as hopeful. That if individuals like you are getting pulled down, well, then that's exactly what you don't want to hear in regards to being able to be
Yeah.
resilient and moving forward. I think to me, it's like, great. Talk to me in regards to branding. And I would ask you about a couple of success stories. And here's what I would say. I understand. Look, folks, Nicholas has worked with some serious products, whether it's Unilever or McDonald's, Pepsi, and Coca Cola. Not to mention, you heard Comedy Central and Interbrand and MTV being thrown around. When did your mind? Because I would imagine when you're handling branding, you've got to find really, you've got to be a master of details, I would think. And I wonder, did you always have that sort of like X-ray vision, so to speak? Um, because you got to be able to see very specific things, if I understand branding correctly. And how does your mind, I'm always curious, how does your mind work that it gets you to be able to do that sort of focus?
So I'm going to turn that on its head slightly and say I'm probably the least detailed person you'll come across.
Right. One more,
So
one
sorry
more
to
time I get to
so,
learn.
so there are different roles in branding, and
Okay.
I've always seen myself in and it's not to sound cheesy, but in a pioneer
Hmm.
way.
Mhm.
So you've got different types of people. You've got founders, pioneers. You've got those who are responsible for taking the business now into the future. Those who are there who are to anchor it and make sure that
Mhm.
that everything works correctly. So I'm very good, like a racehorse, in short bouts of excellence. So that's how I work. I'm very good in short bursts, but I would never be a great CEO and last 20 years at a company and be the one to plod along with 0.5% growth every year. That would drive me absolutely, and it has driven me absolutely hog wild in the past. So my for where I really come in is if a shakeup is needed and moving into a new country and trying to figure out how do we take all of these little strands? So, say we're going into a new country,
Mhm.
how do you make sense of it? It's very difficult if you are, imagine, John, I had to drop you into Nigeria, say, okay, come and launch a new restaurant brand. You potentially, I'm just hypothetically saying, you're going to be, where do I start?
Mhm.
Do they eat chicken? What type of
Mhm.
chicken do they like? What is the media landscape like? There are tons and tons of questions, and you don't know suppliers, you don't
Mhm.
know the advertising landscape. That's where I'm great. I have a wonderful ability to be able to absorb, like osmosis, random things and big picture things and put it down into a plan that can get you started.
Mm.
Once that has been done, then the other professionals and those who need to actually make it happen and take these plans forward
Mm.
with more care and more incremental growth in each of the various sections, research, understanding the target markets, products, etc.,
Mm.
they come in. But that's the kind of role that I typically see myself in is if there's a big issue, a big problem, we're going into this new data and AI world.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
Mhm.
That's come and ask me. I'm not I like the word polymath. That's kind of how I see myself. I've got a little bit of knowledge on so many things and I can bring these together. Not a specialist in any of them,
Mhm.
but I can bring these together, bring the right people together, bring the right kind of theory, and oh, this will work for this particular use case because I've used it here, seen it there, read this bit of history. That's really where my skill set comes in because I just like so many things. It's difficult to
Mhm.
say, okay, Nicholas, you are an Excel spreadsheet specialist or you specialize in doing this particular type of logo. Having
Right.
said that, branding is quite obviously is quite a structured process. So I
Yeah.
do work within bounds, but
Mhm.
in terms of my role, it is that pioneer role going into a new field, new industry, and just setting the stake in the ground, so that you can attach an anchor to that and haul the rest of the crew onto shore. So that's a roundabout way of saying what I do, and probably didn't answer your question, but that's a nice, starting point, perhaps.
Well, you actually did, and in the sense that I would think that one of the reasons I was asking the prior questions was simply because that so often just human nature. And I'll speak again, I'll speak for me. I'm not labeling anybody, but I would just say that it's if you're in a new country and you're having to bring, in essence, a personal dynamic to it, your own safety, your job security. Am I going to be able to succeed at this? I don't know anything about any of this here, but you've got to go help a client in the meantime when you're literally like trying to like grab for a life raft. And that's kind of what I was thinking. It's I like when I hear the way that people describe the way that they think, and I see that it helps people because in that sort of sense, I could picture myself. I would be very concerned with the grabbing at what matters to me personally as much as what matters professionally, as much as what matters from an outward facing perspective. Walk me through the system from your perspective, not from a client perspective. Like I said, your visions. You come in short bursts and you're able to do that. What are you looking at? Pick any client, pick any category, doesn't matter. I'm just curious at the way that you see things. What do you look for when you're like, okay, here you go. Make
Well,
this work.
well, like a baby being born, there's been a lot of work prior and activities
Really?
and thought process gone into it before the baby is born. But once the baby is born, then you're at the coal face. You've got to get going. So let's have a look at when we were starting a data science company
Yeah,
in Malaysia.
Malaysia. Yeah.
Very tough. I knew very little about data science, and I went and read and I read and I read and I read and I read and I
Okay.
did competitor analysis and I did competitor analysis and I spoke to people smarter than myself. And the benefit of going into an area where there are not necessarily millions of specialists in that particular country is you only need to be 5 minutes ahead of everyone else at the beginning. And even in your particular role, you can't pretend to be a genius and pretend to be a specialist in something that you aren't, because you will be found out pretty quickly by those who are. But in new industries, like with ChatGPT and this AI area that we're in now, nobody knows any more than you do, actually, even those who are specialists in a particular field, because that field is changing and they are so specialized, they've got their blinkers on for that particular field. It's about talking to customers, and this is I don't know if it is Patton or Clausewitz or whoever it was, but every plan is great until no, there we go.
That sounded like Mike Tyson.
It was not one of those military geniuses. It was Mike Tyson who
Right,
said,
who said,
everyone has a plan until they hit it, they smacked in the face. That's the same kind of thing. So you can have a brilliant business plan, go and sell it out to a couple of clients, and you are shot down like a Zeppelin
Yup.
because the idea is a trash one, or it is a good one and nobody understands it yet. And at this phase, you start thinking, is it our job to be the first in the industry to train everyone and educate everyone? If you're an IBM or if you're a Google, yes. If you're a small startup, the answer is 100% niet. So that is no for our American listeners.
Thank you.
But that's one word I know most Americans know. That and da.
You're so right, man. You're so right. And hence, if you're listening, you can't see my eye roll, but the answer is yeah. Not yet, but anyway.
Yeah. So that's very important. Is just you've got to test it with the customer. And if I take that then to Nando's, which is the restaurant as I mentioned, selling chicken into the country where chickens probably were invented and spicy chickens at that, why would you do that?
Hmm.
Because it was tested and there was a specific affinity with the brand. And we had to adjust some things. We had to make the sauces, additional sauces, spicier. We had to bring in vegetarian options. We had to bring in rice versus fries, which is what we used in South
Right.
Africa. So
Right.
adjustments like that. So it's about looking at what sells, what does well in the local market, and how can you adapt yourself to that. And then just talking to customers. And it's amazing. Customers do give you some good feedback.
Mm.
And yeah, the proof of the pudding is obviously when people sign, is when a customer signs on the dotted line for a contract, and that can be quite a long process. So you've got to have a bit of patience. You've got to have thick skin and a be like a rhinoceros. Just you've just got to carry on through the carry on through the jungle and bump into trees and bump into things until you get what you want.
Is that a family trait, that sense of resilience? Do you think that that come from your family? Did it come from your dad? Did it come, you know what I mean? Or is that just something that inherently you get dumped into a new locale and take
Well,
on rhinoceros traits?
Well, we were having a look at how many schools my eldest son, who's 11, has been to.
Okay.
He's been to basically one new school every year since he was born. So he's been,
Oh my
or since
God.
school age. So he's been to
Hmm.
about ten schools.
Hmm.
And we've been in a whole bunch of countries, South Africa, and in South Africa we moved from Johannesburg to Cape Town, then to Taiwan, then to Malaysia, and then to another school in Malaysia, then to Norway. So these poor kids have been through the ring, and we feel like gypsies who are always
Right.
on the move. And when I was a kid, we moved around quite a bit as well. With my dad's church, we'd be in one city, then another city, and my sister and I are all born in different cities, and then after a while stuck in one place. But there's definitely a bit of a wanderlust in the family.
Mm.
And in terms of I'm a very good mix of my mother and father. My mother is a workaholic and is who's kept the family fed and clothed and off the streets basically.
Hmm.
And my dad is you know a, a real a proper genius. He's
Ah,
probably uh, and so I've got, I think, in my personality tempered. So I'm not the genius, but I've got some of my dad's brains and some of my mom's hardworking skills, which has been quite good. And then that ability to have blinkers to filter out things
mm-hmm.
that you don't like has been quite useful.
What does your mom do? What does your mom do?
So my mom was a secretary,
Hmm.
and
Great.
she runs. She's a what is the word? She's a clerk of the court. So she basically runs the day-to-day operations of a law firm.
Hmm.
But she always wanted to be a game ranger, and she told me that in her day,
Uh-huh.
they didn't allow female game rangers. So that was something she missed out on. But it means that every year she's gone to the Kruger National Park, which is the most amazing
Hmm.
game reserve, and she sponsors the cheetah foundations and things like that. So,
Hmm.
but in terms of my mom, her day job was that, but with my grandfather was attacked in a robbery and paralyzed in 1980, just basically before I was born.
Okay.
And my grandmother was 55, and in those days there weren't pensions and there wasn't welfare. If you lost your income, that was it. Basically, you were on your own. So at the age of 55, my gran had to start working again, and yeah, my mom and my gran worked at a market every single Saturday and Sunday since
Hmm.
I was born, basically selling aromatherapy oils, potpourri, pressed flower pictures,
Hmm.
things like that. So that's what I've grown up with. And I started working at market when I was 8. and did that until I was left school and moved out on my own. So I've been asked me to sell anything to a middle-aged woman. That is my target market. I can do it. Anything, anything.
Anything. So you said a couple things there that I mean, look, while it is heartbreaking when I hear that, like, as you said, if you lose your income, you just lose it. Uh,
Yeah.
it's for some crazy reason when you explained it to me, it was like, no, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. However, I also would say, I love when I hear the sense of resilience for them, that they were there and that they did, and that food was provided. Um, and I love that sense of, as you just said, hey, I can sell anything to a middle-aged.
I've just got to
Great,
mention one thing about my grandfather. So he
cool.
was an engineer. He was in the R. He fought in World War II as a gunner in one of these
Hmm.
airplanes and that. And he was an inventor and very successful. So quite a successful businessman. And then he was paralyzed. So and they had to cut out part of his speech center just so he couldn't talk, he couldn't write. But he had lost half his movement, but his brain otherwise was perfectly fine. So for the next, and he died at 85. So he had what, a good 40 years, not 30, another 30 years or so after that, where no talking, not being able to communicate, but still just getting on with it. And he used to draw motor car pictures and airplanes that we used to sell at the market. And he showed me resilience and why I've got a bit of a low tolerance for people with a limp or people with some small issues keeping them down. I've seen, and
Right, right.
whenever I feel a bit, oh, poor Nicholas, not
Mm-hmm.
earning as much money as I should, or oh, people are
Hmm.
mean to me, I think about my grandfather not being able to talk, not being able to do any of that and still with a smile in his face and walking going up these speedy escalators with his stick and half his body working. I thought if he can do it, there's no matter if they chop me in half, I will still have to work and be happy. So and that's part of what drives me as well.
It's important to know. And I would
Yeah.
say, if I heard you correct earlier, that if I heard you correct earlier, that's how you knew your grandfather. That your grandfather was already, this had already happened
Yeah.
before you were born. So you only
Yeah.
knew your grandfather as someone who was going through those hurdles and then just did it. And so
Yeah.
I, I'm I catch myself personally getting pulled down from time to time over or like small things. These stories help me because it's the same deal as I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but that they're able to live a happy, productive life. It's a hope situation rather than everyone else should do the same. So I love
Yeah.
the fact that you're able to draw on all of these references. Um, and so that you've got like this. Oh, when you said something else that I find fascinating, that when you were talking and you said your eldest is 11, right? How many
Yeah.
kids do you have that are going, like when you talked about every year we're in a different school? How many kids do you have?
So I've got two boys. The youngest one is
Great.
8. So
Okay,
I've got
so
the
plenty of
two.
it
Yeah.
moving for him too. Um, when you said that at first, I think I literally almost gasped and then caught myself because I think about the way the kids are inherently, they learn things instantly and they adapt just as instantly. And I
Yeah.
just picture the way that little kids are able to like ski when they're 3 years old. And meanwhile, I'm just going to go face first into trees at 40. You know what I mean?
But first.
Right. And so I think about that. That could very well be the groundwork for a spectacular childhood if it's in the from the right set of eyes and ears, because I don't know anyone in my circle, sphere, whatever. So you're the first that would say that, and I love that hearing this, that you're able to share with your kids that sense of new cultures, new environments, new learning experiences, new ways to absorb. is it something that they are appreciative of, or is it just the standard, this is how we do business here in the Kühne household?
And that's such a it's good to reflect on these things because
Yeah.
we've decided to sort of stay put now for a little bit
Okay.
because when kids are young, you have the opportunity to they much cheaper when they're smaller. So, and much
They're
more
not listening to this, right? That they're looking at
yeah.
some commodity.
Yeah. In terms of, I mean, so moving from school to school and country to
Mhm.
country, it's much less disruptive for smaller kids in terms of
Okay.
friends
Right.
and
Right.
social networks and things like that. Obviously, now as they start getting older, when we left Malaysia, there were tears but
Hmm.
now they're still friends. They play Roblox or whatever these games they're playing, Minecraft and that with their
Right.
friends and talking with each other. So it makes it slightly easier.
Hmm.
It it does give them a little bit of perspective, perhaps. We say, if you don't behave, we're going to go back to Malaysia or back to the Chinese school. And if you don't do your homework, you can either have Norwegian homework or Chinese homework. So that
Slightly
is one of our,
cruel, but all right, fine.
yeah. But
Um,
that gets them into shape really
got
quickly.
me into
So
shape.
yeah. So there's the difference in cultures. It
Mhm.
means that when they are older, they'll want to sort of retrace the steps as well, perhaps.
Mhm.
They've got such a variety of friends. They eat everything, um, open to travel and things like
Yeah.
that. But again, when they're small, they don't absorb as much as you
Okay.
necessarily think. I mean,
Okay.
when we were in Malaysia, they went
Mhm.
to my wife's Taiwanese, and they
Okay.
went to a Taiwanese school
Mhm.
in Malaysia,
Mhm.
and they learned Bahasa Melayu, which is the local language as well.
Mhm.
We've been in Norway for 2 years. They can't speak one word of Bahasa. They can't remember any of their Chinese. So
Okay.
there's it's this survival instinct. Your brain goes to what is going to help me survive at the moment, and you, like old skin, just slough off that old skin,
Mhm.
and you've got your nice new skin for this new environment that you're in, so that you can survive properly. So they're going to be survivors. And yeah, at least they've got nice stories to tell in terms of where they grew up and all the places they've been to. So it's a good starting point to get them into the diplomatic corps, I think.
So I'll switch gears entirely and take that information, that in terms of adaptability and you just described the skin removal, and I think about it, and they go back to the way of messaging and branding and conveying sorts of information that you see things where companies are, whether it's by they have to or they've hit a wall or whatever the case may be, and change their identity in regards to branding. It seems like almost completely you've talked about coming in and in short bursts are able to make certain things happen. Are you a proponent of, in essence, blowing up uh brands and reinventing them, and if so, do you have any examples of that you've seen or observed that all of a sudden they drop their skin and now there's something else and it worked?
Well, we can take a current controversial example if you want,
Sure.
which is that of
Yeah, yeah,
Jaguar.
yeah. With the lettering.
And
Yep.
yeah, and my immediate reaction was, oh, these I mean, woke people trying to take everything from us. Now they're taking our
Hmm.
cars and our nice
Hmm.
Jaguars.
Hmm.
But I took a step back and I thought, wait a minute, this is the car industry. The car industry is in an absolutely catastrophic position. Jaguar has been in a nightmare position for years and years, not really fitting in anywhere. They used to be, if my grandparents used to have Jaguars, and that was,
Right.
the Mercedes Benz
Sure.
of
Oh my
of
God,
the
it's a
day.
Jaguar.
Exactly.
Right.
And and now nobody goes, "Oh, yeah, I want a Jaguar." Nobody.
Mhm.
So
No.
if your market is dead, if the car industry is moving away from being an industry where it's about the engines, because Jaguar
Hmm.
had, fantastic but also rubbish engines at the same time, but their design was beautiful
Hmm.
and the sound of the engine.
Hmm.
We're going to a stage now where the engines are finished. Don't need engines. They're these little things that sit on your tires. on your wheels, electric
Mhm.
motors. So now we're going back to coach building,
Mhm.
and which is, in the olden days. And if you look at Cadillac, they had coach builders, and you had all of these Lincolns, etc., that were made by coach builders.
Mhm.
We're going to go back to that, I think, with cars, because the engine isn't now what people are as interested in. It's just going to be a box with wheels, like kids draw. And now,
Uh-huh.
you can personalize that box to however you want it to be. GM, Tesla, all of these companies have got their little target markets. And what Jaguar is doing is saying, okay, we either kill our brand, so kill it off because it's too expensive, or we use this amazing background we've got in terms of energy and excitement and
Uh,
design and being first to something,
mhm.
to be very specific. Jaguar basically, and this shows about how old my marketing is. Jaguar wants to be the new Subaru, basically.
So I didn't realize that's where they were going. So right off the bat, you helped me because I had no idea where this was going
Yeah.
at all. The last person I know, by the way, I still remember the commercials where that even the way the old commercials where it was like a very, very affected sense of Jaguar. And because in the States, because there's no affect, it's all affectation. Well, I got a Jaguar, and
Got a
yeah,
Jag.
right. And you're like, okay, it's yeah, okay. So I remember that sense of it. It was an event if you sat in it. So I just, as I was saying, the last person I know, that was, my God, he was a young dude, and it was years ago. So now it's a question of, but I didn't realize that's the direction they were headed, which is interesting. And God, good luck to them with that, because it's like I never. That's why I love having a brand person on, because to me that just feels like such uncharted waters, you know, that it's like you're going to so reinvent yourself that you want to be the comfortable car that the soccer moms and the gay people, me being one of them, you know what I mean? We're just supposed to be drawn to Subaru.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the point, is that, and it's very marketing 101.
Right.
I
Okay.
can see right. I mean, it's so transparent, but
Hmm.
it is. Look at how much press and how much excitement has gone into the market.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
This is they've
Mhm.
now expanded from lesbians driving
Mhm.
Subarus to
Mhm.
now the whole LGBT. We've got something nice for you, and can you imagine what they can do with it? And then what generally happens is you have this stretch. The box will sort of compress into like lozenge kind of shape, and then come back
Right.
to its square shape. People say, "Oh, actually, maybe we can have a different shape of this
Mhm.
car, or maybe we can, have different colors, or do
Mhm.
something interesting." So you do need this sort of expansion to the edges, with it to be brought back, so that the mainstream can sort of catch up, because we do like going forward, but just at a slower pace than everybody. So
Well,
we'll
you said
get
the
there.
5 minutes ahead earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Maybe
we
that's
are,
what
so
this
but you've
is.
got you've got to have those 5 minute ahead people, and that's what it is. I mean, it's a little bit cheechy, and it's a little bit it seems like it's a little bit old fashioned in terms of how they're doing it, because it's
Yeah.
but I think they might get something good out of it, and we'll see what the actual cars look like. If it's just hype and then they come up with the same old looking things as we're expecting, then it to be very
Hmm.
disappointing,
Hmm.
and it to be which is most likely the outcome. But let's see, maybe we stand corrected.
So, from your vantage point, seeing a lot, experiencing a lot, creating a lot, what would you say in terms of now that as everything continues to move so much more quickly, whether it's far ahead or 5 minutes ahead or whatever the case may be, what's exciting you right now in regards to whether it's innovation or whether it helps in regards to your business or your day-to-day living? What excites you right now?
Can I honestly say that everything is exciting me? Absolutely
Okay.
everything. This is the best possible time to be
Mm-hmm.
alive in the whole history of humanity. So anyone being glum and
Mm-hmm.
we're living longer, we're living better. Yes, there might be lead or asbestos floating around in some things, but it's not gonna get us. I'm excited about how we are at this confluence point because people have a whole bunch of technologies, society, science, etc., are coming together. We're not there yet, but all of these strands are going to come together, and we're going to have this enormous we'd say geyser explosion moment where everything comes together and propels us to something new. It's more exciting, obviously, in the first world versus the third
Right.
world, obviously.
Right.
But I think in terms of
Mhm.
just ideas and thinking, and
Mhm.
I hate talking about AI it annoys me because I was right there just before before ChatGPT came out, and then ChatGPT came out and stole all our thunder. So that annoys me a bit, but
Okay.
we're on the right
Mhm.
trajectory, and I think that there's so many exciting things happening in this space
Mhm.
that we are going to see in a couple of years, another 2, 3 years, some real impact coming from AI in a positive way.
Mhm.
So everything's exciting me. I love
Mhm.
what's happening in the majority of what's happening in technology,
Mhm.
energy, politics. Everything is moving in the direction it should be, and you've just got to pick something and go at it, and you will be successful. Doesn't matter what it is. And there's some anachronistic examples. I've interviewed companies who are doing direct mail again with boxes and with things in them and handwritten notes. So
Mhm.
all of these things that were dead are now coming back and have got a space. So whatever you think of, whatever you want to do it, and
Okay.
let this new technology, help you sort of fast track that idea. If it's terrible, stop it and do another one. But
Mhm.
just very exciting times in general.
Nicholas, you just said a couple of things that I just wanted to follow up on. Number one, when you talked about that sense of, in a few years, it's going to be what should people, let's take people out. First, we'll go with companies, like companies that are either, and I typically tend to tailor more toward those that are stuck or are regressing. Same with individuals, that those that have experienced some degree of success. Maybe it's Jaguar maybe as an example, but like that are accustomed to success and are flailing at this point. What should companies be doing and obviously waiting isn't the answer, but what should they be doing to better prepare or to optimize that sense of in a few years, these strands are going to come together?
It goes back to very basic principles, and this is
Fascinating.
why, as you get older,
Hmm.
life becomes sort of much calmer because you see there's a nice rhythm
Hmm.
rhythm to things. Every company goes through their Homer moment, not Homer Simpson, the original Homer, and Odysseus and the Odyssey.
Ah, okay.
Because the question which always fascinated me is Odysseus had this huge challenge that he had to overcome, and he had these travails, and he had to go over the ocean, fight monsters,
Mhm.
etc. And then he
Right.
killed the monster, got his girlfriend, etc.
Hmm.
And now what? Is he going to get fat on his little throne somewhere and eat olives? That's what happens.
Uh,
And nobody is actually really happy sitting on an island eating olives unless you're a real Greek
mhm.
and are using the European Union money
Mhm.
to keep you on that island nice and fat. That's a very old, horrible joke. I'm sorry.
I like
But
it.
what it means is that you need to find your new Odyssey. So
Hmm.
and that's either your company has run down the clock, and it is no longer meant to be a
I
business,
understand. Story's
and
over, so to speak.
yeah, or you need to reinvent a new story for yourself. So let's
Mhm.
have let's have our news story. Okay, so we've achieved this wonderful goal that we never thought we would. It was such a huge thing. How on earth did we manage this? And we did. You've almost got to take your breath and think, okay, and also enjoy that you've had some success and you've done well. And it's the consolidation phase. So for those companies, there's two parts to this. Consolidation phase, go back to what made you great in the first place. Go back to why you were able to go on this big journey. You were healthy, you were energetic, you had a vision, you had the best people around you, had your friends, you had and you had this fire in your belly. Try and reinvigorate that to maintain the home front. But then you need to create a new odyssey for yourself. You need to give yourself a new goal, because humans hate sitting around. We actually love being busy, and this is why companies that get too big and people can sit around and have too many lunch parties and things like that, like a shark, the company will die. You need to be nice and lean and mean. You need to have a vision, and you need to make sure that everyone understands where you're going. And this is where branding comes again. This would be my last point on it. You've got to make sure that everyone in your company understands what you are trying to achieve. So that in 30 seconds in a lift, anyone who asks them, what does your company do? What do you stand for? Every single individual in your company should be able to answer that question. If not, get rid of them, or get rid of your HR department, or get rid of yourself if you haven't taken the time to get people coalescing around an idea. So at least they know what you stand for. They don't necessarily all have to believe in it, but they should be able to tell other people, who is this Odysseus? Oh, he's done this and that and going to do this and that. And that's why we're going on this ship in these perilous waters. Yeah. So that for me is exceptionally important. So that internal branding and making sure there's alignment around a common goal. People love an enemy; they love a common goal. So give them something to coalesce around, and your business will do better than those who just flop around. Yeah.
Let me ask just two more questions. One of them is this, which is, that's a company's perspective. What from an individual's perspective? Say that they need to reinvent themselves in some way. That in essence, either they've been kicked out of that company that you described like a shark that needs to be lean and mean. There's a lot of people that I know in circles and worlds that have to reinvent themselves. From you, that again, I acknowledge you, Nicholas, from the sense of your life experiences, your family experiences, the countries, the companies, and that you're so outward facing with this. What are a couple of suggestions in a very top line sort of sense of what people can do to reinvent themselves, to give themselves a chance?
Well, I'll give you one very personal example, because I'm going through that entire process myself. And I've spoken about my kids moving country to country, etc. I've also had to move country to country and meet new people and have to build up my networks all from scratch. And the biggest and most valuable thing that I've done is I've written down my, you have your New Year's list of all the things you want to achieve and want to do. Wrote all of those down, absolutely everything. And I look at all my lists from previous years and I move them across and see what I have done and haven't done. And now at 44, I saw that list and I had about 20 things that I wanted to do. I want to sing in the opera. I want to do this. I want to write a play. And I counted how many months I've got left, probably 1,000 months. I think 1,020 months is what I've got left until I die, potentially. And then I worked backwards. Which of these can I actually do really well? Which of these can I get my 10,000 hours in? Which of these am I going to be able to do? And I worked it back from the year to months to weeks to days. How many hours in a day do I actually have to do X, Y, Z? And that gave me a real clear awakening of what I can actually achieve in the next couple of years. So what I did is all of these things I'd dreamt about doing and wanted to do, I had a glass of wine and I crossed them out, crossed this one out, crossed that one out. And I was like, that was a great idea. Gone. and I made difficult, terrible personas, like I was losing a friend almost. I had to cut these ideas off me that were like barnacles that were sitting, hey, Nicholas, come on, let's do this. Hey, come on, let's do that were pulling me in multiple directions. And I had to cut things that I really wanted to do. Cut, gone. And focus on one or two of the things that I had some expertise or experience and ability to achieve. And I've cut everything else out. It's horrible. I feel very sad that I'll never be able to do this. But it's what it's done is it's given me such clarity in terms of this is what I'm going to do, and it has to work because I'm giving up all of these other nice things. I will just get it done, and I will make it work. And if you focus your attention on something and you keep at it. I know a lot of folks who are maybe slightly older think, oh, I've got limited time to make things happen. Maybe I should chop and change. No, you've got to stick at one thing. And it doesn't matter how niche and how ridiculous it is, it can work. Absolutely. The person with the handwritten notes, he's now got 200 handwriting robots writing hand notes. Who thought that would be a thing?
Brilliant.
Any ridiculous idea you've
sake.
got, but it takes time. And you've just got to stick to it.
Wow.
So give yourself a year, but do the work. So a bit roundabout, but cut out all of these nice things that you'd like to do. Get rid of them. Don't even think about them ever again. They are gone. And focus on the one or two things that you've got control about or can focus on. And I guarantee if you do it, you'll have some sort of success.
Oh my God. You're a hell of a storyteller, because like I said, I was following those pieces around and actually feeling sad when you were cutting off like the barnacles. But it's to me, it's just a really powerful way to go. Richard Kühne, I am very grateful that you showed up for us today. And folks, if you damn right you're a podcaster. You're watching and listening to us. So here's a great one from startup. And please correct me, Richard, from startup. Is it Wunderbrand or is it Wunderbrand?
Well, first, it's Nicholas. I know everyone calls me Richard. I have no idea.
Oh my God, I don't know
literally
where.
Everyone.
Nicholas, forgive me. I'm so sorry.
I get called Richard. I mean, I should add.
I just went brain dead. Forgive me.
You're not the first.
Kühne.
It's either Richard or James, but it's Nicholas Kühne and it's Wunderbrand, like
Wunderbrand.
Wunderbar. Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. Like I said again, is a great place. What else? Where else are we finding you that you want us to be? Your social media guys, well, obviously that's where we're going. You included me on LinkedIn today, so thank you.
I've got two places. If you'd like to learn a bit more about me, the podcast, and all those other social media things, it's Kühne.no, Kuhne.no. And if you want to know more about branding and some exciting things like that, you can go to wunderbrand.com. Both
incredible sites. Nicholas Kühne, thank you so much for showing up for me today. This is a hell of an episode and a better, way better than a travelogue. I learned a ton and you made me very happy. Thanks so much for showing up.
You're most welcome.
And folks, you just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. Keep watching, liking, sharing, and we'll keep driving more content through your front door. John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Have a great rest of the day, all, and we will be back at you soon. Take care. Be well. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.